Murray House co-sponsored event, Tradition and Modernity, Globalization of Hip Hop, Spotlight on Middle East. Thank you so much for being here tonight. And I'd like to give a shout out to our co-sponsors. There are many of them. Murray House, Comparative Studies and Race and Ethnicity Department, Muslim Students Awareness Network, the Residential Education Department, Cardinal Knights, the Rydell Fund, the Sahib and Sarah Abbasi Program in Islamic Studies, Stanford Students for Palestinian Equal Rights, and Stanford Says No to War. So quite the lineup. Thank you, everybody. So let me tell you a little bit about who we've got up for you tonight. First of all, I'm Farah Weheba, or Farah, and I'm a focus assistant in Murray House. Thank you. And we're really excited to have some very special guests with us today. We have Omar Offendum, a Syrian-American rapper, and we have DAM, a Palestinian group. And it's also featuring DJ Emancipacion. And we're also going to have an interview, so let me tell you kind of the agenda of how things are going to be broken up today. So we're going to have first a live interview with Dr. Ramzi Salti. He is a lecturer in the Arabic department, and he has a radio show called Arabology on KZSU. And that's on every Thursday. He's going to be conducting a live interview and discussion with Omar Offendum and our three members of DAM, Tamer, Suhell, and Mahmood. And then we're going to leave it up to you guys to ask some questions for 15 minutes, whatever you'd like to know about the globalization of hip-hop. Any burning questions you've ever had about the globalization of hip-hop, this is your moment to shine. And afterwards, we're going to kick everybody out for 15 minutes and rearrange the stage for performances. We're going to ask you to enjoy some delicious baklava in the back room there. That's all set up and ready for you. And we'll call you back in at about 9:35 to start the concert portion of the show. And then we'll have an opening act from Samar Ahmed, and she's the Egyptian Fulbright Scholar on campus this year. And she's going to be, since the title of the show is Tradition and Modernity, Globalization of Hip Hop in the Middle East, we decided to kind of open the performances with a throwback, a classic Fairuz song called Ana La Habibi. And not a lot of people know this, but someone is an undiscovered star. So she is going to be, no, it's true, she's wagging her finger at me, no, it's true. So she's going to blow us away with a cover of Ana La Habibi by Fairuz. And afterwards, I'll come up and introduce Offendum, and then DAM will do a set, and then we'll have some freestyle collaborations. So I'm really excited about all this, and I hope you are too. And what I really hope is for everybody to get damn offended tonight. So let me tell you a little bit about our artists. So I have a little narrative for you to share about Omar Offendum and the impact of Syriana Americana in my life. So about 2 years ago, Professor Sami Alim in the CSRE department, I was in his class called Politics of Hip Hop Youth Engagement, something very long title, but basically it was about hip hop in academia and the globalization of hip hop. And I was his student, and he was first to introduce me to the music of Omar Offendum. And I grew up in Kansas. I'm Egyptian American, and I grew up in Kansas, and I didn't know that there was a space for me to be biculturally fluent or even bilingual and not have to compromise one of the two identities. And Omar was my first kind of example of seeing that happen, and that was a very special moment for me. So, you know, I started, and that was part of Brooklyn Beats to Beirut Streets. Mike Gonzalez, Omar Offendum, and Ragtop came out to the Coho. And from Offendum's visit, I learned more than just to appreciate hip-hop. I learned more about my Arab American identity and the state of internal-external conflict in 2 hours than in any public policy, social psychology, or international relations course that I'd ever taken. I was highly offended. And I hope the same happens for you tonight. So, I started asking questions like, who is the narcissist? What is a Lupe Fiasco? And there's a world beyond techno? Most F there is. So, thank you so much. Thanks for putting up with all my puns. And I hope you enjoy the show tonight. First, we're gonna, and DJing, by the way, is the lovely DJ Emancipacion. And she is an Egyptian DJ based in Oakland. And you can go out to her parties every second Sunday of every month. And she went to school here. She is a Stanford alumna. Yeah. And but leading the interview portion of the show is going to be Dr. Ramzi Salti. So I want to welcome everybody up on the stage. So at this time, I'd like to welcome Tamer, Mahmood, Omar, and Suhell.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
It's so nice to see everybody here. I'm Ramzi Salti. I've been teaching Arabic here for 15 years, which technically makes me, I think, yes, the oldest person in the room. I think half the audience I've taught Arabic, the other half, by the end of tonight, you'll be taking my Arabic class. So start signing up. It's so nice to see everybody here. And as Farah said, I also have a radio show called Arabology on KZSU. And that show was, one of the first shows to actually highlight something called Arabic hip hop. Because like a lot of people who come from the Arab world, I didn't know that there was such a thing as Arab hip-hop. I thought, this is purely a Western notion. And the globalization of hip-hop has been amazing. And here I am, a 40-some-year-old guy who's like addicted to Arabic hip-hop. So it tells you that it can reach anybody from any background at any time. And truly, to me, when some of my, let's say, more elitist colleagues at Stanford heard about me being involved with the Tradition and Modernity globalization of hip-hop, with the spotlight on the Middle East today, they were like, what, you think you're 20? You think? And I said, no, if you really listen to hip-hop, it doesn't really matter what age you are, number one. Number two, this is poetry. This is exactly what poetry used to do to people. I think it moves people when you listen to them. I remember hearing Omar Offendum's Qari'at al-Fijjan, and just the way it was presented got me addicted to the song. It got me to look into his work, and of course then that English translation. I suddenly became very cool. I started using gestures in class, and and then to talk about the group DAM, because to me, I don't know if this is too relevant, but I don't have kids, so to me when I see this younger generation of what could be my kids doing such amazing stuff. Shukran Habib, bakshish jai. I paid them before to make me feel young. But seriously, the kind of impact they've had, these are not kids or young men who grew up with the easiest life, and to actually take to music and sing despite circumstances that can be very, very difficult. It's just surviving that and then turning it into an artistic art form is, I think, a victory of its own. So ahlan wa sahlan bikum fi Jami'at Stanford. And I'm going to be asking maybe some general questions that maybe some of you or most of you would like to know. But I'm not going to delete the whole thing because we're going to turn it over to questions from you as well. This is your chance to ask them anything you want. I spoke to all four of them. They said you can ask anything. So you don't have to censor yourselves tonight. Well, alhamdulillah. I don't know, Farah, you want me to sit down or stay up here? I am getting old.
I think there's enough.
All right. نطفي هذا الميكروفون.
Let's get a round of applause for Farah and for Ramzi.
Yes, I'd rather be sitting because we don't want this to be, formal. We want everybody to be comfortable. Let me start with the question that everybody asked me to ask, because whenever we play a song by DAM or by Omar Offendum, the phones at the radio station don't stop, and it's amazing. People call. Some of them are like Arab Americans living here who can't believe that on 90.1 FM, right in their car, they're hearing Qari'at al-Finjan, or they're hearing one of DAM's songs. And I have been living here 30 years and I never hear Arabic. Let me begin by asking maybe DAM about the name, because there's a lot of debate. Does it mean blood in Arabic? Does it stand for something? How did you come up with the name?
First of all, I would like to say thank you for having us, first of all. And then for me personally, I don't want to answer this question first. Oh. I want to just say something. It's really emotional for me to be here on like a table having DAM and Omar and Ramzi same time, because unfortunately we can't have this thing in Palestine. We can't have this in Syria. He can't come to Palestine and we can't go to Syria and he can't. So it's like really kind of confusing emotional things for me. And now I'll get to the question. DAM stands for الشيء الذي يدوم, دائم, دائما, immortal, eternity, and you can, in Hebrew it's blood, if it's without the A, and in English it's the Arabian MCs. So we mixed it all together, just trying to act deep, like we're really smart. But so we say, even if we see blood, the Arabian MCs will stay eternal. The Arabian MCs will be immortal.
And who came up with the name? Was it all three of you?
The name at the beginning came with DAM, from DAM, yeah. And just when we grew up, and because it sounded cool when we were teenagers, but during time we started doing shows at universities and we sounded stupid, so we had to find a good meaning. But at the beginning it was just DAM,
The Arabian MC.
But DAM from eternity, it have a lot of abad.
No, depths.
Yeah, a few. But one of them is yes. When a guy like Lieberman says we don't want Arab here, so DAM will, as Palestinians will stay here forever. If somebody says that hip hop is something that will pass, no, as artistically will stay here forever. So it just بالبالة كل شيء يعني.
It suits every occasion, I guess. And let me ask the same of Omar. Omar Offendum. من وين اسم? Where did we get that name? I mean, it sticks with you, I'll tell you that.
Offendum, it was like a stroke of genius when I was like 17. I wish I had like really any more depth to it. But basically, I was part of a hip-hop crew when I first started. I was in college. Me and a Sudanese friend of mine I grew up with, called the Nomads, notoriously offensive male Arabs discussing shh. When I was growing up, when I would act up around the house or whatever, my mom would call me Effendi, Amr Effendi, and for those who don't know, Effendi is it's like a title of nobility or a ranking within Ottoman culture, Turkish culture. So it's like saying sir or lord. And Offendum is the possessive form. So often in the Middle East, whether it's Turkey or even Egypt, people will say Offendum out of respect to you. And me spelling it with an O obviously was with the intention of conjuring up offensive imagery here in the States. Offendum, he's going to offend us, when in reality it actually means something very kind of noble and respectful. So for the name to embody the disconnect that happens there linguistically between something over there and something here was really important to me, because it in itself was a conversation starter. And then just on a personal note, my mother's grandfather is Turkish. His name was Omar. He's the one I was named after, and he was actually Effendi, Omar Effendi. So that's kind of where it came from.
So he lives on through your music all night.
Yeah, I don't know what he would think about my music. I've seen one picture of him. It was like an old black and white photo. He had a big long curly mustache. Big scary guy.
You're like, nice beat, man.
So yeah, maybe I should
Revisit that.
that. We'll see.
So for the group DAM, I don't know if you guys know, but they have 2 albums, officially released albums. They've been involved in many other things. The first one is called Ihda, which means dedication. And the second one, that's brand new and that's playing on KZSU like every other hour, is called Nutbukh al-Omar, Dabke on the Moon. Can you tell us how the first album came about and how different the second album is from the first one?
Well, first album, Dedication, was out 2006, the end of 2006, the beginning of 2007. It was a very, very clear, obvious, direct message that we wanted to deliver. So it was like shooting a documentary film, but musically, doing it in Dedication. And this is what we did. It had social, political, personal songs. It actually had more social songs than political songs, but because we come from Palestine, so everyone is concentrating on the political side, though the album wasn't, if I need to call it a political album, I wouldn't call it political album. Dabke on the Moon is much different. We worked with, the first one we worked with different producer, and the second one we worked with another producers who are coming from the pop world, with a famous producer from Denmark, because we wanted to try and to experience new things in our music. And it was more as a feature, if I want to describe it as a feature film. Yeah, it's just telling stories. We did this album and we told stories. We told stories of prisoners. We told stories of women that are killed under the name of honor killing. And that was Dabke on the Moon. It was very, I don't know if to call it mainstream music, but it was definitely different than the Dedication album. We just tried to experience a new thing musically and also lyrically.
Which brings me to this question about this, the song "Law Arja Bizaman." If I could go back in time, which I believe Amal Murkhos participated. I don't know if you guys have seen this video. It's a really powerful video about honor killings, and something that takes place in some parts of the Arab world, and which, in my opinion, is a very shameful practice. That was a very gutsy move on your part. And I'm going to be frank with you, not everybody supported that video. A lot of people, including, like, I don't know if you've read on Jadaliya, you were kind of criticized for maybe further demonizing the Arabs and Islam at a time where the West seems to be doing that so systematically. But at the same time, when you watch the video, you're moved by the fact that so many women have been silenced, have been killed for something as simple as, the very rumor that they have lost their quote-unquote honor, even in this day and age. How problematic has that been for you to be received with high praise and high criticism?
I'll try to make it shorter, but it's
Big one.
It is a big one, yeah. First of all, reactions I had, the Jadaliya thing, it was from 2 women who lives in the US, in the Western world. They didn't like it. I will get to that later. But most of the girls in Lid, where I live, I remember Sir Mahmoud, when we did it in Ramallah, the first preview in Ramallah, women in the crowd start crying, and I'm talking about her, and it was about them, not about people who are, it's about them, not about people. That's how it started, not about people who are living in the West, because I consider it honor killing. It's my problem, and me as an Arab male, I want to face it and say it's my fault. I want to fix it now, and I think it so reflects the Arab Spring. It came with the Arab Spring. Millions got out to change the way they live. So I think it's a shame that they thought that way. This is one. Second, funny thing, when I wrote it, we live in Lid. Lid have at least 15, 16 murders over honor killing, and it's girls we know over the rumor of sex. And even if they had, you know what, I'm gonna take it for, even if they had sex and orgies, I don't think it's a reason. يعني if you wanna go that way, I think that there's a funny part with عادل إمام. لو كل واحد نام عجب واحدة رقاصة في البلد، كل البلد حتنام بالشارع يا مان. The same, if you wanna kill them, most of the men will be dead today because we do worse than that. يعني. This is one. So it's women we know, it's girls we know. If we didn't know the women, we knew the guy who killed them. So we live that, and I think it's about time to end. So when we wrote that song, I wrote it to the Arab women. And I had a call to do a phone with an Israeli radio, and the host was, we have DAM, the new single, it's about honor killing. And just to remind you people, only this week 2 women were killed, and she mentioned 2 Israeli Jewish names. So it's beyond. It's against women, and it's about against the violence against women in general. One last thing that I had actually a good answer, but I forgot. One second.
You mentioned the 2 women here in the States.
I think something with when, and I can understand that the West, a lot of Western people see us as bad people, evil people, and a lot of Arabs from the outside see us as these Arabs, brave Palestinians, and if they see us only this and only this, then that makes us unhuman. And if these 2 women they want us just to be this beautiful, handsome Palestinian muqawam that fights only the Israelis, then it's not it. We are also a society. Each society has its problems. And if I'm brave enough to face it, then that means I'm talking about a new generation. And I think that you should buy a mirror, put it in your house, and also, sorry for the long answer.
No, but that's exactly what
If you clapped before, I would have stopped, so you should have.
There's a domestic violence everywhere, and it's something known. And us as kids who started rapping political stuff, and then suddenly, when you go to protests in Palestine or protests in my city, when there's demolishing houses, suddenly you see people in the protest walking with you in a protest that you organized, and they telling you that they came to this protest because of our songs, and this is how they got knowledge for the political reason. So I think we have to do that too.
Yeah.
I think we have to give knowledge. If we have influence with this part, we have to give other influence. And if DAM would be just singing politic and just singing about Palestine and not singing social stuff and not singing even fun stuff or just hip hop or just having fun, we're really bad and not human, and we're fake, and we're using the political situation, and we're using Palestine, and we're using the dead people who've been dying and fighting. And I don't want to be that person who's using just where I'm coming from.
Yeah. I'm going to include Omar in this because, we're talking maybe about resistance being sort of what's expected. There's always resistance literature, resistance lyrics. There are Palestinian groups, all their songs have to be about Palestine, and if they segue into women's rights or women's honor killings, they get sometimes criticized, as we saw. Do you feel that hip-hop, in terms of the globalization and in terms of your own music, has grown to encompass more topics and broaches more subjects than what initially used to happen?
Well, yeah. First of all, yes. I guess that's the short answer. But what I actually wanted to ask the guys just something artistic and stylistic about the song. What made you want to write it backwards the way that you did? For those who aren't familiar with it, it's a song about, I guess you could say it's a song about honor killings, but they actually wrote it as a narrative that starts at the very end where she gets killed, and then it actually works backwards. Nas did a song like that a while ago, yeah. And
I would say that we are very influenced from Nas. And yes, when we thought of it, Nas was a reference.
He was, okay.
Definitely, Rewind is an amazing song, Why? I think that when a woman get killed, murder, it stops right there, Nobody asks, sorry for بس شرموطة ماتت نقطة خلاص just it is unfortunately, guys. Even just take the body, it's like a race. When a car have an accident, just remove it and continue the life. And they don't, and even sometimes if the father rushes to the hospital just to bring the shahada that she was a virgin. And that's it, just to prove that she died. She was, and that's it. It stops. So we decided that it stops here. Why? Let's go back. Let's go back. Let's go back. She died. She was named the word that I said. So I want to go backwards to see where she did wrong. Where she did wrong. Was it here? 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 And it ends. It starts with her death, and it ends when we know what she did wrong. When the doctor says you got a girl, and because when you are a girl, in an Arab society, I will not try to make it something universal, because especially in an Arab society, then you are guilty until you are proven innocent. That's why I went that way.
Well, thanks for answering that. And then I just wanted to also note about the Jadiliya stuff that had happened. For those who aren't familiar, again, the Jadiliya is a website, online news kind of source that started up basically right after the Arab Awakening or Arab Spring. Very academic, very kind of heady writing, very critical, very great work. But this particular piece that criticized them, I felt just kind of was way off base. And what was really annoying about it was that it was kind of, it was disingenuous. I mean, they were talking about how huge fans of them they were and how disappointed they were that you guys decided to do this. And it's like, well, if you were really fans and you really felt that way, then you could write them. They're very accessible. They're very easy. I'm sure he would have responded right away. You didn't have to put them on blast to kind of show off your academic prowess.
Sorry,
or
but you know
whatever.
what pissed me off more?
What?
You know what pissed me off more? They said that we fell victim to the Western propaganda. That means we sold out or we're stupid. One of these two things. That what pissed me off. Because we didn't sell out, we are stupid. But we didn't sell out.
No, also, like, they pointed
Say
out...
it, we are stupid!
They pointed out, they said, oh, why, and then why the UN? Well, you mentioned how you had reached out to other organizations and nobody wanted to support the video or the project, nobody responded except them. And, so that was an important point to be made. But back to your question, Ramzi, I mean, for a long time, while I was doing what I was doing, nobody really knew where I was from. Just kind of being Arab American, associating with a lot of different cultures in the Arab world. I mean, I was born in Saudi Arabia, I had Palestinian family members, Egyptian family members, and so I kind of just more generally just associated myself with Arab more than anything specific, even though if you'd asked me, I'd always tell you I was Syrian. But the songs and the way people started to take them in, for a long time people thought I was Palestinian. There's that Palestinian rapper because he's rapping about Palestine. And then I did a song about the Egyptian revolution. I was on Al Jazeera and it said Egyptian rapper below me because they never bothered to ask or inquire. And then the Syrian revolution started and I created a song about the revolution in Syria. And then it's like, oh, there's the Syria guy now. Now we know who he is. He's the Syria guy, And I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, I'm not shocked by any of that because I think I've done it myself in the past. Watching music videos, you kind of just start to project onto the person things that you assume you think you know about them, about their life. You think you know everything about them because you've seen a 2-minute video clip about somebody. So once I started seeing people do it, to me, I was like, okay, I see how this works. And, took a step back and realized that, for me, at the end of the day, I'm a human being who's making art with a particular purpose or, desire to kind of do it as truthfully and honestly as possible with my experience while still being art and, writing narratives and stories about other experiences I can relate to. So as long as I was coming from that place and making sure it was coming from an honest place, I didn't need to worry about what people were saying or how they were kind of internalizing the things that I was saying. That's on them, and I kind of freed myself of that burden, I guess. And it liberates you, but it took a long time to kind of get to that point, It's hard. Because as an artist, you also start to get, especially today, when you have access to people's comments every single day on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. Oh my God, I can't believe they just said that about my mother. It's like, you never even met her before. But it happens, and you just grow thick skin and you kind of move on and, make sure that the art is always getting better. That's the most important part of that,
Absolutely. Now, this next question is a little emotional because we spoke before the show, and I was trying to tell all 4 of these amazing young men here how their music has a profound impact on people, despite the generations and the language barrier. Sometimes it's just accessible, it speaks to you. And we spoke of a young man who unfortunately passed away, who was a huge fan of DAM. and who always listened to that album like non-stop. And I just remember him always saying, it makes you feel better, they understand, their music speaks to me, you cannot find that. And unfortunately, he was in Jordan, and he didn't have maybe much access to rap music in Arabic. How do you guys feel when you know that you're moving people so deeply and that you're speaking to the experiences of people not just in Palestine but all over the Arab world, people who are marginalized, who are oppressed, can relate through your music to what you're going through?
Amazing.
أول شيء الله يرحمه طبعا. I think because we coming from a place that it is very hard, that have a big poverty problem and big drug problem, and of course a huge political problem, as you know. When I speak about my neighborhood, when I speak about my poverty, when I speak about Arab on Arab crimes, or police on Arab crime, or soldiers on Palestinian crime, Arab against Arabs. When I speak about the right of the return for the Palestinian refugees, then of course I will affect many people that feel or live the same thing that I live, because they feel connected to my message, they feel connected to my lyrics, and they can put themselves in that song in different ways. And the funny thing, I was affected in the beginning by Tupac, and I was affected by him from images, because I only saw the images. I didn't understand English back then, but I saw the neighborhood, and I saw the poverty, and I saw that he talked about political problems, and I felt connected to that music because he talked to me. So I guess it is the same thing when you are talking about issues that they are real and they are happening. Then people will feel connected to you and connected to your message and to what you are trying to do.
Yeah. Now, in terms of reception, though, you know, do you feel that you have more, I don't want to say better reception, but are you more accepted in the Arab world, in the West, or in, let's say, Lid, where you have a very different kind of population that you can speak to directly?
I wouldn't know how to measure it, but if I measure it by concerts, it's my third time in Stanford, and I only had one show in Lid. I did 20 shows in Paris, and I only had one show in Lid. Not just that, it's beyond that. I had 30 shows in New York, I only had one show in Amman.
Why is that, Tamer? I mean, what?
I would, at the beginning, I think it's the Israeli passport in
No.
general. I have an Israeli passport. And I don't get invited to Israeli festivals because I'm a Palestinian, and I don't get invited to Arabic festivals because I'm an Israeli, so in a way that some kind of a schizophrenia that they decided that I don't have. I would say that's my main problem. I would call it discrimination, yani. And in general, I think alternative music, before it becomes mainstream, I think hip-hop, when it started as hip-hop, rock and roll when it started as rock and roll, it just takes time until it proves its spot. Also, so it's also the evolution of the alternative music and the new revolutionary music, plus an Israeli passport. I guess that's my...
Yeah, because I guess, you know, maybe we're taking this for granted, but many Arab countries will not let people with an Israeli passport even perform. But we're speaking about, you know, a Palestinian group here, the first hip-hop group from the area who are affecting change. And this. And
but a place like Syria or a place like Algeria, I cannot go because there are no embassies. But Egypt, يعني في بنات they have, يعني I'm talking about before the revolution, يعني, but they have embassies, they have business together, but when it comes and nobody, not many people بنتقدوا.
Not criticize
that, but when an Egyptian singer decides to do something with a guy from Palestine 48, everybody starts saying betrayal or تطبيع. So it's easier to attack the
Right.
يعني في hypocrisy كمان بهذا الموضوع.
No, absolutely, because you said that you felt, that there was hypocrisy. There's a double hypocrisy going on because you can't, you're seen as a Palestinian in Israel, so you're the other and you're different, and then you go to the Arab world, and suddenly instead of being embraced for the bravery you're showing through your lyrics, you're actually
Just to be clear, I'm talking about institutions basically,
Yeah.
the people who's doing the festival, because when it comes to people, I think that's the beautiful thing about hip hop. Sorry, but that's
No, of course.
يعني Palestinian Arabic music existed from قديش يعني a long time ago. And have you ever heard of a duet in between? يعني I can count on my hand 5 duets I remember in the Arabic world. Hip hop. How many songs do you have with Egyptian MCs, Omar? How many songs do you have with Iraqis? How many songs do you have with? We have that song together, and I said that line that you will not find Arab in the same spot on that beat except in Guantanamo, maybe. For real, because I think that when hip hop came, that's the beautiful thing about hip hop. Not just, I don't want to make it just political and deep and Middle East. Even just grab a Lil Wayne album that had no. You can see the Drake, you can see the featuring. Look, it's a unity music, يعني فيها unity. And I had the chance to work with Lebanese. لبناني يعني ريس بيك مع جزائري يعني people يعني who are the enemy يعني فاهم according to my passport يعني. I think that's why I love that music. It's so united. The word featuring, it's a revolutionary word in the hip hop world.
Well, if it's any comfort, I mean, I was in Beirut and I was in Amman last year, and I interviewed groups like Mashrou' Layla and groups, Reyes Bek, Zaid Hamdan, others. And the people were always talking about why, DAM can't come here. They cannot perform in Beirut, but the people want it. I mean, the audiences are there, and thanks to the internet, are able to tune in. So we're talking about maybe a sad reality that the demand is there, the thirst for you guys is there. It's just this bureaucratic issue that stops you from actually performing live to people who need
Actually,
you.
we had suggested to go into Lebanon, that they will organize something for us to go in somehow and to perform there. And but Lebanese will accept us, even if it's the government. We would get in, we can. But then when we go back home, we won't go back home. We'll go to the Israeli jails. We'll be arrested. I don't know for how many
going
years.
to Lebanon.
It's
the
more
enemy.
complicated than that. There's this writer, I don't know if you heard of him, Alaa Ihlahel. He's a famous writer. He had that website Qadita. He's a Palestinian carrying the Israeli passport, and he had this invitation because he released a book, My Secret Affair with Carla Bruni. It's a funny book. He describes that she comes to Palestine wearing hijab so no one will recognize him or she's having sex with him. Anyway, it's a funny book. Anyway, he was invited to do this festival, this Tamer Nafar in Lebanon.
A conference for literary people.
Yeah, and dude thought of something smart. He applied for the Bagats. You know the Bagats?
No.
The high court.
That's the highest court, the Israeli highest court.
Oh,
He
okay.
applied and he asked, it's not weapons, it's nothing political, it's just art. And it went on like a month or two, and they agreed that he will go there. And the Lebanese people agreed to accept him. And he didn't go. He's like, I just did it for the point. I have a kid, I don't want to fuck him, sorry, I don't want to do it. But it's complicated, yeah. But
Yeah. One last point about this, because we had Sayyid Qasur a couple of weeks ago, and he gave some talks here. Of course, he's at Stanford, and he writes this TV series for Israeli TV called Arab Labor, and he was also talking about his frustration about being pigeonholed and not being able to translate. So you guys are right in the footsteps of somebody who was saying the same thing, and the situation definitely should change.
What's our music there?
Yes, I was gonna say, do you guys know that they did the soundtrack Nغير بكرة, which means change tomorrow, and it's with children, right? Mahmood, they're like children singing.
They were children, not anymore.
When it was
a long time ago when we did the dedication, and they are children from our neighborhood.
Now they have children.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
So old suddenly.
these guys are talking about, going, oh, bring me my wheelchair. Omar, your music, though, it doesn't face the same censorship, do you think, in the Arab world? You're able to perform anywhere? Do you feel more of a liberty when you're traveling?
Things changed drastically for me in the last 2 years, just given what's happening in Syria. First of all, I was born a Syrian citizen before I became naturalized as an American. And in Syria, the second you go back to Syria, they don't care where you think you're from, you're Syrian. You could have a Syrian great-grandfather and they want you to serve in the army. So I could actually never go to Palestine growing up, and it's something I always wanted to do, but the way that the laws are set up, obviously, if they ever found out, I would never be allowed back into Syria. I couldn't go see my family, and so that's just not a possibility. So I can somewhat relate, to what you guys are talking about. But what's interesting, though, is that, obviously with the Syrian revolution, I'm not allowed to go back into Syria now because of what I said on that song. So that's a whole irony in and of itself, because I was born in Saudi Arabia and I'm not allowed to go back to this country that I never lived in anyway. So interesting. But when I go to places like the Gulf, like in Dubai, for example, to go do a show there, I get very, very clear orders to not perform, not even just political content, specifically this one song, because in the hook of the song, they're saying, "Ash-sha'b yurid isqat an-nizam," the people want to topple the regime. And even though it's entirely about the Syrian situation, it has nothing to do with the Gulf, they don't even want people just thinking that they can even say that out loud, There were Guy Fawkes t-shirts that were made, with kind of Syrian flag on them, and those were strictly banned in the UAE. You're not allowed, nobody's allowed to wear any Guy Fawkes memorabilia or you'll get apprehended. So, it's real. And then I got invited to go perform in Qatar, and I assumed because of Qatar's presumed stance on what's happening in Syria and kind of support for the revolution, that I would have a blank check, or not a blank check, but free reign to say whatever I wanted. And halfway through performing this one song, I noticed that there were some local Qatari guys who were wearing the traditional Qatari dress who enjoyed it and were chanting along. And as I was doing it, and there was maybe 500 people there or something, and there was maybe 3 or 4 Qataris in their local dress chanting the song and enjoying it. And as I was doing it, I looked at them and I was like, oh, that's going to be a problem. And sure enough, right afterwards, I got a warning saying, you're not allowed to do that.
What song was that?
"Ash-sha'b yurid isqat an-nizam," the people want to topple the regime. And just so people who know, this particular phrase, the people want to topple the regime, this started in Tunisia, and then it moved into Egypt, and into Libya, and it was spray painted on a wall in Syria, and that's what ended up sparking the revolution. And it was a very heated kind of thing, and in the Gulf especially, So it even shows you how in the Middle East, we here in the West, especially in the media, they kind of paint it as this just one, big blob of the Middle East, but it's so different from one country to another. Yeah. But it reminds me, there's an old Family Guy episode, I think, where they're flying over the Middle East and he looks through the window and it looks like a map of the Middle East that you'd see in your old textbook, and he's like, oh, it really looks like that. Yeah. It's not, it's so different from one place to another. Life is so different and the things people experience are so different. And you can be thousands of miles away from one of the most horrific, bloodiest, disasters ever taking place on planet Earth and have no idea. You'd be in a bubble and just, living life and eating hamburgers and thinking it's all good, really. So,
well, if you guys have not heard of Omar Offendum's album, it's called Syrian Americana, and you probably are living under a rock if you've never heard of that album. But
or they're just not listening to your radio station because you play it.
I think it's beyond KZSU at this point. It's everywhere. But that album really is a classic in terms of you bringing, poetry from Nizar Qabbani, for example, bringing Asmahan and remixing Asmahan and doing it in a way where even the old people who listen to the real Asmahan will say, wow, I'm getting into this. So a lot of mixing on Syrian Americana, and when you came here a couple of years ago, we were speaking about the album.
Yeah.
Who would have known that 2 years later, the Syrian revolution would still be going on? It's bloodier than ever, it's more tragic than ever. How do you feel now about that situation, and are you going to translate that into your music in the future?
You know, it's tough with Syria. Like, my emotions fluctuate every single day. You know, I have family there, and, you know, for a long time, my mother and my sister were still there, and so I couldn't even say the things I wanted to say out of fear of them and what might happen. Families of activists have been targeted, even not just activists, even musicians, artists. I mean, there's a Syrian-American piano player, Malik Jandari, who played at a rally in D.C., and then a few days later, his elderly parents in Homs got beaten up by thugs sent from the regime. So it was a very real fear, and I wrote that song, #Syria, in August of 2011, and I didn't release it until March of 2012, and, you know, it changes every day, you know, and the thing is with the Syrian revolution, it's like they call it the orphan revolution because everybody forgot about it, you know. We were just talking about this earlier, everybody was so gung-ho with Tunisia and Egypt, and then like, you know, with Libya, but then the way Libya ended was kind of weird, and then Bahrain is like, let's just put that one away, and what the hell happened in Yemen, and then Syria is like, we don't even understand, it's like the toxic revolution. Everybody forgot about it, nobody wants to touch it, it's too complicated politically, it's too much of a mess for people to be able to comprehend, the ramifications are just so huge that it's like daunting to even talk about or broach the subject. So, I mean, it's heavy, but for me, what I've said consistently is that beneath all the political posturing, all the proxy wars, and all the conspiracy theories, there's very real human suffering taking place, and it's 500,000 refugees outside of Syria and millions internally displaced, 70,000 killed, hundreds of thousands in prison. So it's just a dire humanitarian issue, and for me as a Syrian and more importantly as a humanitarian, that's kind of what I feel like I want to focus on, because if you get sucked into the political argument, and there is plenty for both sides to sit there and say whatever they want to say about it, you'll end up losing sight of the fact that at the end of the day, well, there will be no Syria for them to come back to, you know. And if nobody's taking care of these kids who've been out of school for 2-3 years in these camps now, then, you know, then what are we really fighting for, you know? So that's kind of where it goes with that. It definitely influences everything I do. It's also created a huge writer's block. I mean, for a while, it's like, what the hell do you want me to say after this many people have died? And, you know, like, what do you want a song to do for you, you know? But what I have done, I think, relatively successfully in the capacity that I can is use the music and the song as a rallying point to get people to come together and to raise awareness and to raise funds for the cause. And so I've tried my best to at least do that, you know. But the community gets tapped out after a while too, you know. It's like one fundraiser after the other, and it's like, all right, we have no more to give, and people keep dying, and you just feel helpless, you know. But what gives me hope is hearing the stories of people there. Every once in a while, like in the darkest moment, I'll hear something from, you know, a cousin or my brother-in-law who does relief work between Turkey and Syria that really just gives you hope that, you know, there will be something to look forward to, or at least to feel like it might be worth it in the long run. One small story was, sorry I'm taking a long time here, but just to give a little bit of, I guess, positivity. There was a man at a market, a farmer's market in Reyhanli, which is a border town between Syria and Turkey that my brother-in-law had run into. The man was waving at him like he recognized him, but my brother-in-law didn't quite remember, and he assumed he was one of the people he had helped give aid to, but he just didn't know in particular who it was. Anyway, he walked over to his stall, they started talking. He said, my name's so-and-so, you probably don't remember me. And then at that point, a customer had come, and so the man turned to the customer and they started talking about these olives that he had for sale. And they were talking about how difficult it is to get olives now, how olives are more expensive than olive oil, and that's never happened before. And this is all because you can't harvest in northern Syria anymore because of all the violence. And the guy said, lucky for you, I happen to have this batch from my house that I just brought before I came. And so he sold them some olives, they talked about them, and he sold them. And then the guy turned to my brother-in-law and he said, you know what I did? I took the winter care package that I got from you, from this relief agency, which basically contained like blankets and coats and shoes and heating oil. He said, I took that and I sold it, and I used the money from that to get me a ride to the border and to pass the border and then to pay for my stall here today. And I brought my olives from my house and I made 5 times as much money as I had made by selling that bag. And so, yeah, there might be a question of like ethics. When somebody gives you a donation, you should keep it. But this guy actually turned that into entrepreneurial spirit that all Syrians have, I believe, and turned it into something even more, you know. And that just made me realize, like, people don't want to just take handouts, you know. They want, you know, you teach a man to fish and he'll eat fish for a lifetime. And so that's kind of the thing that keeps, one of the things that kind of keeps me,
So,
you know, looking forward, yeah.
So I So for DAM, I know you are really involved with a lot of projects. Can you tell us a little bit about the projects you're involved in and the upcoming ones? And then I'm going to turn it over to everybody here to ask questions. I know that there's a couple of projects you're involved in that are dear to your hearts. And that's where we begin with.
I'm working on a few scripts now, a few projects. I'm working more on films recently. That's why I directed also the music video. If I could go back in time, I directed it with Jackie Saloom. She's the director of Slingshot Hip Hop. And we're writing few scripts now. And that's what I'm mostly working on these days.
Scripts for like a film? Or?
Films. I'm mostly working on films.
Wow.
And before coming here...
Suhell originally came from the cinema world, and I'm gonna be honest, the hip-hop stole him